Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I'm so excited to be bringing you a very special guest today. So when I started inviting guests onto Shameless Leadership, I immediately knew I wanted to invite my dear friend and speaking colleague, Elena Joy Thurston, to join me. The work that Elena Joy does around inclusion always captivates me. I always learn so much from her. She is smart and witty and strategic in all the best ways, as you're going to hear in this conversation. And she also knows exactly what needs to get done to get the work done. Her unflinching commitment to tackling tough conversations while upholding human dignity always blows me away. And while her knowledge around inclusion and its connection to burnout, which we dig into a lot in this episode, is robust, her methods for tackling challenges where these areas intersect are very approachable and welcoming. So all this is to say that Elena Joy makes me want to be a better human, and I suspect she's going to have the same impact on you. In an official capacity, Elena Joy Thurston, she, her, is the CEO of Latitude, a boutique HR consultancy specializing in creating sustainable leadership pipelines through burnout prevention and emerging leader programs. A Mormon mom of 4 who lost her marriage, her church, and her community when she came out as a lesbian, her viral TEDx talk on surviving conversion therapy has attracted clients such as the Denver Broncos, Peloton, and Planned Parenthood. She's featured on the award-winning documentary Conversion, which, holy cow, is an amazing, incredible, must-see documentary. And I got to interview her and the creators of Conversion a while ago. So you can search back in the archives for that. So that recently launched on Apple TV and Amazon. Elena Joy lives in Arizona with her 4 children and spends her spare time dreaming of her next fly fishing trip. So listen in to hear Elena Joy share how she saw the writing on the wall with DEI before 2025 and made an intentional pivot in her work in order to continue to achieve her goals around inclusion in the workplace. She talks about the truth about the state of DEI currently, what has been taken from us, and what we still have to work with, and what that means in terms of sustainable leadership. We talk about how understanding coworkers' identities opens the door to communication and decreases burnout. Then we dig into burnout, all things burnout. So what burnout looks like in 2025, how it looks different for Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, how burnout is universal and individual at the same time, the importance of creating a positive emotional experiences to counter the feelings that trigger your burnout, and how do you use her release and restore method to shift your energy daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. You're going to love this conversation. Elena Joy is just always such a treat. She's such an outstanding human. I know you're going to learn a lot, and you're also going to walk away feeling inspired and eager to take action, maybe in some ways where you've been feeling a little stuck or not sure how or what you should do in a certain situation. So I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, Elena Joy Thurston. Elena, welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm so excited to have you back. You were here before for the Shameless Mom Academy. Now you're back for Shameless Leadership, and I'm super excited to dig into everything.
Thank you. I'm so excited too. This is my favorite podcast to come on, so I'm so excited that you invited me back.
Yay. Well, and when you were last on the show, you hadn't done a ton of podcast interviews, and now you've done a ton of podcast interviews. You've been on all the stages. You've spoken for all the organizations. You've been all over doing all the things. So now you're like a total old pro.
Oh, yeah. Total mastery. Definitely. No. Every conversation, it's wild how different they are. Wildly different. Yeah.
Yes. It keeps us on our toes.
Yes.
And it keeps showing us that we can be nimble and we can adjust and be adaptive in any given moment.
We can pivot.
We can pivot, which is exactly what the world just keeps requiring of us.
It
Isn't
really
it great?
does. And up-leveling every day. Because every day is a new circus. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, totally. So you and I, giving the audience just a little behind the scenes, we met through sharing a speaking coach in a coaching group, which was such a lovely and fun experience. But we've also had the opportunity to watch each other's work shift, grow, pivot for the last few years. And we had a really fun catch-up conversation not that long ago about how your work has been shifting. And I'm working with so many leaders and speakers right now where the work that we did, between 2020 and now, or 2020 and the end of 2024, looked like one thing. And then suddenly, like, our values haven't shifted, our goals haven't shifted, but how we approach the work that we do has had to shift a bit so that we are, and I'm like having to use air quotes so that we're like legally allowed to use it. And there's like a lot of eye rolls that I also use when I say that. So can you tell us a little bit about how and why your work has shifted?
Absolutely. So I had a framework around inclusive leadership, and this was because my personal story connected to it for sure, but also we can prove out how it impacts positively the bottom line. And so that gave me the confidence to walk into organizations and say, this framework is going to not only improve lives, day-to-day lives, but it's also going to improve your bottom line, right? And then in 2024, inclusive became a dirty word, increasingly so as the year ran on. And probably in October, my team and I started kind of tossing around some backup plans. Like, all right, if this goes south, if we can't use inclusive leadership anymore, what are we going to do? How can we pursue the same impact and support the same people, but without barriers to engagement? And so we tossed around quite a few ideas. And basically what we came up with was a combination of all of them, as the best ideas are. And we started the pivot right after the election. And by January 1st, we were able to launch it's almost the exact same framework, but it's through the lens of sustainable leadership. And so we approach that in two ways, one through emerging leader development, and then the other through burnout prevention. And we found that we were able to not only increase the diversity of the people who were in the room, but they found it became a universal theme, and that is a huge part of my work, was finding universal themes to allow people of very different life experiences to be able to connect in an authentic way and connect with themselves. Right. And so that's what we really wanted to pursue. And burnout prevention was the response to that, because it is something universally we can all succumb to, although the experience of it is very individual, a lot like sexuality, a lot like many things.
I love it. I think this is one of the I guess, biggest benefits of being an entrepreneur and having your own business. It's also one of the biggest challenges, is having that ability to recreate things or reframe things or repackage things in a way where you're like, okay, okay, well, you're not going to let me do it this way. Well, you obviously haven't met me yet, because I'm really creative and I can figure this out, and I'll just do it a different way.
Oh, yes.
Which I love about what you're doing, because as you said, we're now able to really uphold the same values and work toward the same goals and even get some better results and actually even advance inclusion or advance diversity in the room, which is also like a little bit like of a ha ha ha.
A little bit. A little bit.
You mentioned sustainable leadership. So can you define that for us? Because I love this term, and I'm sure people listening have maybe different ideas of what this looks like or encapsulates.
Sure. So in 2024, when we were tossing around, like, we saw this could be happening, right? We started doing a lot of research. And by research, I mean, we went to Reddit.
Which is my favorite. Like, starting in 2024, literally, I say this all the time. I'm like, did you all look that up on Reddit? And people are like, what? So with you, it's my new favorite thing.
Seriously.
Go ahead.
It's just a font of knowledge, and I love it.
Yes.
And my team basically tried to find every HR board and just read the posts. What are they struggling with? What are HR leaders struggling with? And there were a couple things. Burnout prevention, for sure. The HR leaders themselves were struggling with that, as well as the HR teams, as well as the employees, right? And everyone's trying to juggle, I don't want to delegate too much because that's going to put more on their plate and they might burn out, right? But I'm overwhelmed. And so, yeah, that whole juggle was happening. And so we knew burnout prevention needed to be in there, especially because the way 2024 was going, the people that were feeling the most attacked and the most threatened were the marginalized groups that we were trying to bring equity to anyway. So we felt like that would be really helpful. And of course, the tie from sustainable leadership to burnout prevention is pretty clear. But then what we also saw on the Reddit boards was there was a real lack of emerging leader development in the soft skills. There's all kinds of training programs for the technical skills that they need. But the soft skills, like how to deliver feedback, how to receive feedback, how to lead an effective team meeting, how to create psychological safety on your team, how to respond when a member of your team says they might be burning out, right? Those soft skills that can't be learned in an online tutorial, that's what we really wanted to provide. And we found that a lot of the emerging leaders out there are in a age population that they wanted to learn the inclusion skills as well. And the fact is, if you're developing leadership skills that are effective, those are inclusion skills.
Yeah. Such an interesting point. So we are being told, like, well, you're not allowed to say it this way or do it this way, and it can't look like this anymore. And yet what people really want is, like, most people don't want to be jerks. Most people actually do want to know, like, how can I treat people with dignity in the workplace? And so the fact that I'm grateful for people like you, for people like, for people in our in our industry who are not willing to sit down when the government is like, you can't do that anymore. Because for the vast majority of people that want to uphold human dignity, that want to, make people feel safe in workplaces, that understand emotional intelligence and psychological safety, unlike our government leaders, like we want to be able to meet people's needs in the workplace so that people can, like, will come to work and do good work and want to stay there. And so I really appreciate that you decided to do this research, decided to put these pieces together, and that then you were able to see exactly what people need and how you can meet those needs, and also be able to have this refreshing lens that, people are still good people. It's just we're all navigating under different rules. It's not like we all don't want this. It's that a few people have decided we can't have it this way, have it the way it used to be.
You know what? Let's just go right there. Like, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, in the 5 years that I've been doing this, I still maintain that 80% of America wants to learn the skills to make the coworkers around them feel comfortable around them. They don't want to be hurtful to each other. So this narrative, this anti-DEI narrative, I find it fascinating because I'm going to say something that's a little controversial, and I'm okay with that. Hopefully you are too.
I'm here for it.
All right. So if this administration had come to the DEI practitioners and said, guys, I don't think DEI is working, everyone would have agreed, right? It wasn't. The companies were not doing it the right way that actually creates psychological safety for the most part. There are some gems out there, and most of them are my clients. But the others, these required trainings, and then you'd have these very uncomfortable, very cringy conversations, and they weren't facilitated well because there was no real idea of what the desired impact was. So what are we shooting for anyway? Just have an uncomfortable conversation, right? Like the DEI practitioners would have responded with, yeah, we know it's not working, and this is how we can fix it, because 80% of the population wants the same outcome. They want every human to be treated as a human. And they want the knowledge to be able to do that. And they need the space where they can ask the awkward questions so that they can do that. So if there had been an opportunity to fix DEI, I think we really could have. We're not there now. Now we're having to skirt around some words. And frankly, to me, and I teach this in every single one of my trainings, words are made up. They're all pretend. They're all made up. Right? Like what I mean by trust, you don't mean by trust. What I mean by joy, you don't mean by joy. Right? So let's use the words that we have to use in order to communicate so that we get the impact that we want to have. I'm not going to be precious about what words those are. Now, I will say some very respected friends, people that I respect, are holding strong and fast to those words. Right? And it might be because it's in their title, right? Director of Equity. That'll do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I get it, and I don't begrudge anyone for that. But I also feel really secure in my strategy of I don't care what words I need to use as long as I achieve the impact I want to achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about connecting this back to burnout, connecting this back to and looking at this through this lens, because I know this is what you've been so conscientious of, to look at how burnout impacts people differently, so that then we can honor what everyone's bringing to the table. Like, this is the workaround, right? And I'm going to let you explain how it's the workaround, but addressing burnout in a way that identifies that we all experience different spaces in different ways because of our layers of identity. And so what does this look like in 2025? And then what are the most effective ways to begin addressing it?
I love that. I'll share a pretty typical scenario in a training that I do. So in the training, one of the exercises that we do is identify the many roles that we play. And sometimes people choose to simply keep it to work, right? And all the different work roles that they have. Most of the time, people in 2025, they know their entire life is not work. And so they're also identifying the role they have in their family and in their community, right? They're a mom, they're a sister, they're a daughter, they serve this organization. And then we can take from that role and we can examine and open ourselves up to explore, what identities do I hold that is impacting the work that I do in that role? So let's keep it to motherhood. I'm a mom. I'm a single mom. That's an identity. And that definitely impacts that role. And if my boss at work doesn't know, because it's not safe to tell them, that I'm a single mom, that will definitely impact the quality of my work as well as the engagement. Let's take it a step further. I'm a mom of a trans teen. Right now, that is a massive layer of weight. And for my boss to be able to understand that that identity impacts my day-to-day capacity to engage in my work, then my boss can communicate with me in a way that's actually supportive and can increase my engagement, right? I am newly the mom of an autistic teen. That has brought a whole nother level, right? So let's say that I'm sitting in that training and I have these roles and I've identified the identities that are impacting those roles. And my boss is sitting across the way. And my boss is a 60-year-old white straight male whose mother-in-law just moved in with them. And it's completely changed his entire day-to-day life. Now, he and I are having really different experiences, but both of those could be driving us to burnout. And not one of those is more valid than the other. So when we can create space that by acknowledging how identities are impacting our roles and our capacity and our ability to engage, we increase that ability. When we ignore it, when we create silence, that's when we see the burnout exacerbated. It comes quicker and it comes with more damage.
Absolutely. And I think that when we don't have the skills, we resort to the silence, and because we don't know what else to do. And then what is unsaid becomes louder and harmful than anything that we could say.
100%. Like, we are already starting to see data that Black employees, when they are in a position where they are very concerned, if they are very concerned for their success in this country at this time, and people at work are not talking about it, there is huge impact on their mental health versus when people at work are acknowledging it, are creating safety for that employee to also acknowledge. It's starting to feel real scary right now, when that can be just simply acknowledged. That problem obviously is not going to be solved today, but when the problem is at least acknowledged, there's a huge difference on the impact of mental health.
Yeah. I just did an episode recently about masking and women masking at work. And I talked a bit in the episode about how this has to do with any identity that anytime you are not in the majority identity, you're likely masking in some way, and probably unconsciously as much as consciously. And so I think there's times when, as an example, if I'm one of the only women in the room and some dude makes some weird, inappropriate, gross comment and all the other guys laugh, there's times where I'm going to know this is super weird, but like I'm gonna maybe laugh along with it because it's just easier to laugh along with it. And like I'm aware that I'm laughing at this thing that's making me like die inside. But then there's other times that we're masking where we have no awareness that that's what we're doing. And I think that when we put all these, when we combine months, years, decades of masking consciously and unconsciously in the workplace, whether it's because we are trying to fit in with the group that has the most power, whether it's because we're having to maintain our safety, whether it's because we are feeling like we have to prove ourselves in a certain way, the toll that takes over time is extraordinary. And so when we look at that toll and who's most impacted by the toll, and because of who is forced to have to mask most often, it's not the older white guy who's always had the most power in the room. So he's like footloose and fancy free, and like everyone else in the room is like has I can't think of the word. I was going to say hernia. It's not a hernia, an ulcer. He has an ulcer and like is on anxiety medication because you've just been holding all this stuff in, trying to show up and fit into a space where you aren't able to be fully seen because it's not safe or appropriate in some way. And so I think that's, to your point, I think that when we think about burnout as it relates to identity, we start to see things that we can't unsee, that can't, and then we have to acknowledge them because we can see now how the damage that systems and structures, or lack of systems and structures that allow for healthy communication, are doing to the people who are most impacted.
I think the point that you made that resonates the most with me is that idea of the more we're holding in, that is what is driving us to burnout. And so when we hold identities that create the need to hold in, to bite back, right? To keep the mouth shut, right? Over and over. Don't let yourself roll your eyes, right? Like all those things, we fill up. We fill up with all of that nonsense. And then when we get a moment with a leader who's completely oblivious of what's been going on, and they're trying to engage with us and even pour into us, maybe as a mentor or as a boss who wants to see us succeed, because 80% of them do want to see us succeed. We can't receive. We can't receive that help or that encouragement or any of it because we're full up. We're full up of all the BS that we've been biting back and not saying and not doing. And then we don't develop. And then where do we end up? Not succeeding, for sure.
Yeah. I think there's a level of jadedness that comes with this too, that I see, so I'm 49. So being, in the world for many years now, and being in a place where, like I've seen and heard enough things to have kind of these certain perceptions and even biases. And, you said 80% of people want us to be successful. I have biases, and you maybe have this too, where when I'm leading a training and there's like 5 guys in there, it's like, 40 women and 5 guys. And I have been in this situation where I'm thinking, they probably don't want to be here. They're probably not getting a lot out of this. They're probably annoyed with me. They probably think this isn't for them. And then at the end, all 5 of them come up and like, that was so eye-opening. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I needed. Like I've had that happen more than once, where I've had to really learn to assume that everyone in the room is there to learn with an open mind, even if that hasn't been my experience across my life. And so when we look at our experience over time and being decades into careers, we often carry these, perceptions and biases with us. And then we have people who are earlier in their careers who maybe they're in a different place, or carrying maybe biases in a different way, but also just they're masking in different ways. And so what they're carrying and what their difficulties and challenges are different. So can you talk a little bit about how burnout shows up differently across generations, and specifically like, I'm Gen X and there's millennial. I think you're millennial.
No, I'm Gen X. Thank you.
You're Gen X too? Oh,
I know.
I love it. And then and Gen Z as well.
Oh, 100%. This is my favorite. This isn't my favorite part, but that was really fun. Now, let's just start out with the idea that whenever we talk about the generations, we are mass stereotyping literally millions of people. Okay. So like,
thank you for pointing that out.
Yes. Right. But it's really helpful, specifically when I'm working with the Gen X leadership, to help them understand like what their perspective is, because they simply see it as their reality, and what the other perspectives are. So the data that can be really helpful is Gen X if you have 100 Gen X employees at your business, more of them are going to burn out than the other generations. However, they're going to hold on to the bitter end. There's going to be months, possibly years.
We'll just be cranky for decades.
Yeah, we will not admit to ourselves or anyone else that we are struggling, and we won't give up. We're constantly convinced that we will figure this out. We will figure out how to do everything that we feel is expected of us, okay? And then we have our millennials and our Gen Z, which in this scenario, they behave very similarly, so we can kind of group them together. If you have 100 of them on your staff, less of them than the Gen X are going to burn out in any given year or 2-year period. However, they're going to quit so much faster than Gen X because they've watched it. They've watched the older generations lose their mental well-being, and they are not willing to do that to themselves. So the minute they feel like they're getting close to that red line, they're way more likely to start looking for another opportunity or to simply take a break, to bow out of the rat race for 6 months or a year, take that $20 an hour job that's no stress, and kind of reassess, figure things out, and then jump back in. So you have generations that are handling it very differently, but it's so important to be able to recognize, really, it's the leverage. Let's talk about that. Gen X was raised by boomers, and boomers were absolutely in the system of you're going to find a corporate job in your 30s, and you're going to stay there for 30 years, you'll get the gold watch, and you'll retire. And our generation was the first one that realized that was a smokescreen, and it was changing rapidly, and dang it, because we already bought our house, right? So we're in that little predicament. Gen Z already knows, already is in the reality of they're never going to own property. That American dream is not theirs. So if they're going to live in a rental for their entire lives, they are certainly not going to lose their mental well-being pursuing someone else's dream. Now, they will work their asses off for their dream, 100%. But they will not risk losing the ability to engage in their life over someone else's dream.
Oh, it's so powerful and so interesting. It's funny. So the one of the things that jumped out to me personally is like so my martyr complex is like a Gen X thing, more than just like a Sarah thing.
Yeah, it is.
I thought it was just a Sarah thing. Like, I'm a martyr, but also I'm mad about being a martyr. I'm kind of resentful.
Yeah.
I'll do anything for you, but I'll be really cranky about it.
All right, now you're starting to venture into you territory.
No. I think it's really interesting, though, to look at things that like are, generational versus, just someone's personality or the overlap of both.
Yeah.
But that's really, really interesting. And I actually, it all makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. And this is why I love like sociology and the study of people and human behavior.
Yeah. Data is a beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. So with seeing burnout in these different ways and how it impacts different groups and how it impacts different, people and depending on their layered identities in different ways. What are some things that we can do to prevent our own burnout, regardless of where we might fall? Or maybe this is specific by, certain groups can approach it in certain ways.
That's the beauty of it. So going back to those universal themes, right? It is anyone can succumb to burnout, and every single experience is individual. And we can start from a macro level and say, we're using the word burnout, going back to every word is made up. We're using the word burnout because we all know what we're referring to, but it's not the same burnout as we experienced in 2020, is it?
Mm-hmm.
We're in a world we've never been in before. The chaos is at a level our society has never experienced before. It's really fun to think about, like, how can we compare this time to the civil rights era, right? There was the big boycott of Target, and is that comparable to the boycotts that were happening in the 60s, right? And can we take any lessons? And that's a beautiful thing. But what didn't happen at that time was our federal government wasn't falling apart. Tens of thousands of people weren't laid off every Friday, right? The amount of chaos that's here right now is creating a very unique burnout to 2025. Now let's get a little more micro with it. One thing that we can do as individuals to prevent our own burnout, let's start with defining what burnout even means to us. Because right now, a lot of us are thinking it's the scary boogeyman that we know we're getting close to the edge of the cliff, but it's too scary. We don't want to peek down and see what it really is. And so we just kind of skirt around it, and we just try to take those bubble baths and do those yoga classes, and hopefully it's all going to work out, right? But when we can give ourselves the space to be able to look very real at our own experience and be able to say, what is it? What does it look like? What does my burnout look like? What do the people around me see when I'm burnt out or sliding towards burnout? What does it sound like? What do the people around me hear? How do I answer the phone when I'm sliding towards burnout? How do I handle that one-on-one feedback conversation when I'm sliding towards burnout? And then, of course, what does it feel like? And we start to map out that journey going from, okay, if neutral is content, and we'll say that's in the middle of the spectrum. Well, for me, my journey is I go from content to bored. And if I stay bored long enough, I go to frustration. And if I stay frustrated long enough, I go to anger. From there, I go to apathy. And that's the last step before burnout, when I have nothing left to give. So, being able to define your burnout, what it looks like, sounds like, feels like. Being able to map the journey a little bit so that you can identify some warning signs that you can see, as well as a community of support, at least someone at work that you see regularly, that you trust and respect. What's a warning sign that they can look out for? And then someone that you see outside of work regularly that you trust and respect, and give them a warning sign that they can look out for. And then when we do that, when we ask them to do that, the coolest thing happens. Usually within about 3 weeks, they come back to you and they say, hey, I have this warning sign that I need you to be on the lookout for, right? Because we've explicitly asked for their help and now they're asking for ours. That's a beautiful thing. And then lastly, I would say, we treat joy as a strategy, not just an outcome. So just like we need to define what burnout means to us, we need to define what our opposite of burnout is. So for me, take a guess, it's joy. But for others...
I mean, you have to uphold your name
brand. I kind of have to, yeah. I have to. For others, they've defined it as empowerment or fulfillment or embodiment. Right? That's their opposite of joy. And so just like we map out that journey towards burnout so that we can identify the warning signs, we equally need to map out the journey towards our opposite of burnout so that we can make sure that we're not just running from something or denying something, but we're calibrated and focused towards something else, something that we want. It's a lot like in physical fitness, like you don't just restrict, right? You're a lot more successful if you also identify the good stuff and make sure that's integrated. That's what we're doing here.
So helpful and really actionable to be able to look at both ends. And when you mentioned apathy, I'm like, oh, that's like when I know, like, because I'm like a high emotion person.
Right.
So when it's like when I'm suddenly like, no emotions are high.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Someone else.
If it's high excitement, high joy, or high anger, or high sadness, or high whatever, like I know I'm like operating. Like when I'm like, I got nothing. And it's interesting. There are some people in my life who I know can read that on me. And now when I'm around them, I'm like it's like I call myself on it and out on it in front of them before they can call me out on it because they'll just be like, something's going on. Like you aren't a person who doesn't care about things. You care about everything way too much. So like, what's going on here?
Yep.
And I also appreciate the that acknowledgement of being able to move from one end of the spectrum to the other, or identifying what that opposite feeling is, and being able to then look at how do we get there. I took as part of my master's program, I took a class on the psychology of leadership, and it was a bunch of stuff about emotional intelligence. It was really, really good and interesting. And we had to do this emotional intelligence assessment, which when you know you're going to be evaluated on your emotional intelligence, and you're like, you train leaders. I'm like, I'm wanting to know how to study for this test, basically. I'm like, how do I get a good grade on empathy? It's like all I could think about going into this. I'm like, what if I find out I'm really bad at empathy? The teacher luckily kind of met that objection right away as he was talking about the assessment. He's like, just so you all know, I assess really low in empathy. And we were all like, what? Like, he seems like the most empathetic person, like especially male, I've ever met. And he's like, yeah, I've really worked on it over the last couple decades because I assess low on it. So I take the whole assessment, and then we have to meet with the teacher after the assessment. So I take the whole assessment, meet with the teacher, and he's like, wow, so you're really high on empathy. So I'm like, look at me, really feeling myself. And then he's like, but I'm worried about your joy. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, let's look. And he shares screen. So I had gotten this 21-page report or something. And I basically had only looked at my empathy to be like, okay, I'm good. So he's like, your joy is really low. So my empathy was at one extreme and my joy was at the other. And it was basically that when we were looking kind of through all these other metrics, that my joy is so connected to how other people feel because my empathy is high that I'm dependent on other people's feelings in order to feel joy. And that is not a way to live, by the way. And also a kind of embarrassing thing to have your teacher tell you when you're 49 years old. And it was so eye-opening, but it was really insightful because I was like, wow, this is so true. If the people around me are having a bad day, I'm like, I guess I'm having a bad day with you. Let me sit in this with you. How can I help you? How can I show up for you? And I'm not thinking, how can I go have a great day while your day sucks? Right. And so that was very eye-opening and opened my, helped me kind of open up my perspective to how do we create experiences and opportunities for ourselves to live all out in positive emotions, even when things are hard or the world is crumbling or we can't control a whole bunch of things. And I have a lot of room to work on and grow in that area.
Yeah. We call that a latitude. We call that unconditional joy. How can you access joy regardless of the conditions around you?
Yeah.
It is so powerful. Have you ever taken the PQ assessment, the positive intelligence assessment?
No.
Oh, you're going to after this. Oh my gosh.
Is it going to tell me I have high empathy again? I'm only taking those.
Okay. The whole point to that one is it shows you how your strength, when abused, is your self-sabotage.
Say that again. Yeah. My earbud just came out.
No,
say the first part again.
So this PQ assessment shows you how your strength, like empathy, if overused and abused, can create sabotage, the self-sabotage. It is, you could say, the limiting belief. It's a pattern of thinking. So here I go, and I'm about to take this quiz, and I see that there's 10 results. I'm going to get a label. It's going to be one of these 10. And as long as it's not that one, I'll be fine. It'll be fine. Do the whole test, and of course, it's that one. I think I did throw my phone. But once I was able to pick it up again and scroll down so I could keep reading, I was so seen. It was ridiculous. Yeah. And what it is, I mean, you could go into this with the idea of tell me what you're good at and I'll show you your faults, right? So
totally.
My saboteur, my internal saboteur that's kind of running the show the last time I took the assessment, because it's not fixed. It's not like a zodiac sign or an Enneagram number. The idea is you figure out what's sabotaging, you address it, you deconstruct it, repattern those thoughts, and then you move on to the next thing, right? So the thing that I'm working on, victim. Imagine that you were told that that's how you're sabotaging yourself, is that you are creating a victim mindset. Oof. For me, I know you're responding the same way I did.
Oh, yeah. I would be like, I would throw my phone. How dare they? They don't know me.
You don't know me. And I will say my very first reaction was, that's victim shaming. And you can get real close to that. But the point of it is that my strength is that I feel deeply. And that is a strength. And it's very useful in my career and in my relationships. But I can overuse it where I feel my situation so deeply that I'm not seeing the opportunities around me. Let me give you an example, because you are going to love this story. It's my second most embarrassing story. So I spend a weekend and I'm cleaning the house, I'm vacuuming, and I'm airing out the master bedroom, right? I'm doing all the things that you do on a weekend when you actually want to clean your house. And by Sunday night, I see that the sliding glass door of our master bedroom is open. And my partner has told me that she likes to sleep in cold air under the covers, right? So I'm thinking she's opened it because she wants cold air. But I'm a light sleeper. So I hear all the dogs in the neighborhood all night long, and I don't get any sleep. But I'm thinking, well, this is what she needs, and I guess she prefers her needs over mine. So I guess this is just what we're going to do until it gets hot enough that we turn on the air conditioning. 4 nights go by where I get hardly any sleep. Finally, on Friday morning, I'm like, babe, can we close the door? And she says, wait for it, I didn't open the door. I had opened it on Sunday to air out the bedroom, and I hadn't shut it. But I had created this entire reality that I was being, shortchanged, and I was the victim.
And probably you're going to break up because of it.
Well, with how grumpy I was those 4 days, like we were on the verge.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we talk a lot about internal saboteurs and how those can drive us towards burnout, and the importance of being able to recognize that, it's either causing us to overwork, or it's causing us to not enforce boundaries, or it's causing us to create a false reality that's not there, and we're responding to that instead of the actual reality, right? Yeah. And sometimes those are internalized bias, right? But it seems to be a lot more. I really was fighting an uphill battle when I was like, we all have internalized misogyny, because we do, but that's too big a concept. And imagine how it went when I was like, and we all have internalized racism and internalized homophobia. People could not hear that. But when we can start with something like, okay, you're sabotaging yourself through this, and this is how you can address it, then we can also introduce the idea of, and just like that patterning was put in your brain and is not actually you and is not authentic to you and is sabotaging your success, there's other patterning that is not authentic to you and is sabotaging your success.
Yeah. Oh, so powerful. Such good stuff. So when we're in this moment, this season, that we might be in for a while, where things are incredibly difficult and challenging, what do you have any tactics for when we're trying to create those emotional or those opposite positive emotional experiences for ourselves to counter the challenging emotional experiences that we're in? What are some of the things we can do besides cleaning our house and opening the doors and forgetting them and then not sleeping for 4 nights? Are there things that we can do to call up the joy or the peace or the happiness or the whatever the positive emotion is that we're trying to elicit?
100%. Well, and it starts with those internal saboteurs, because the one that we all have is the judge. When the judge is certain that a circumstance is bad, then our other saboteurs will create all the reasoning and the logic to prove that it's true. So much of our stress and anxiety is coming from a judgment of a situation is bad. And that is usually that stress and anxiety is what is pushing us towards burnout. So it starts there. It also goes into a practice that we call release and restore, and it's R&R. I love it. And it's very similar. You and I think we both read that book, The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control.
No.
Oh, yeah, because Lex introduced it to the group, and there was a concept in there that I really glommed onto, and then I fleshed it out to create this R&R. And it's the idea of when we need to rest. Like, we all know that idea. Again, all words are made up. But we know what it feels like when we need rest. Doom scrolling is not rest. Come to find out. Light bulb. What is actually effective in restoration is releasing all that BS that we talked about earlier that builds up until you can't take anything in, even if it's good stuff. We got to release it somehow. And whether that's through journaling or through therapy or going on a walk with a friend or whatever it might be, we need to consistently release. And then we need to consistently restore. And restore often looks like play. Either play, or another word that I use that seems to help a lot of clients is, what do you indulge in? Is it a whole 3-hour Saturday morning where you get to read a book nonstop and you don't let anything else be a priority, right? Or is it going for a run or going for a bike ride or whatever it is? We have to find that active relaxation just as much as we have to find that ability to purge all the frustration and the anger that we feel every day right now. And so we're identifying R&R. How can we access R&R daily, weekly, monthly, yearly? And then from there, a really fun exercise is when we're identifying those roles and the identities, we also identify what pieces of that role fills us, feeds our souls, right? Fills us up again. Because the more we can identify that, the more we can lean into it, we can communicate it to our coworkers and our partners, and we're able to leverage it for more and more and more of that joy.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I was on a text thread with some other moms recently, and I was actually traveling for work, and I was in this hotel gym that was I get weirdly excited about hotel gyms. And so I had posted about it on Instagram.
You're so
and
weird.
They were like, we don't get it. They're like, what's with the hotel gyms? I'm like, this is my playground. And they were like, that makes no sense. But to your point, finding the place that is playful to you, I understand that that's not most people's playground.
Right?
But to be acutely self-aware, to know that a hotel gym makes me really happy. And this one was way bigger than most of them.
Yes.
And no one else was there. And I was like, I could spend 4 hours here. And so I get it that that's not what other people want to do. So someone else might want to go get a pedicure, a manicure, whatever. For me, being in that hotel gym, that fills me up more than some of those things that fill up other people. And so I think it is really that self-recognition of what is the thing for me, and letting it be counterculture, letting it be weird, letting it be totally different, letting it be, and really giving yourself permission to listen inward and let it be about you. I think that sometimes I think we miss the mark sometimes because we're like, well, I read that it should be hot yoga, or I read that it should be manicures, or I read that it should be meditating or whatever.
Yeah, whatever we've thought self-care is, because that's been preached at us, we think that's the antidote to these feelings of burnout, versus it is finding your one weird play or your multiple weird plays. It's so true. The training that I did this morning, the VP of HR, when we were talking about R&R, said that there's a monthly activity that they do at this organization where they have to put together all these kits, right? Once a month. And he's like, that is my favorite thing to do every month, because when I'm done, I've got this stack. It's so tangible. I can see it. I did the job and I did it well, right? For him, that is restoration. Now, for another employee, that might just be physical labor that they're not interested in, right? And so let that be, once we can recognize that, then we can leverage it to create more.
Totally. Okay, so I want to talk just a little bit before we wrap about how we can, and you've given us so many great examples, but are there any other ways that you want to talk about in terms of how we can meet this moment where identities are under attack, but we still have these same goals of creating safe spaces? And my kind of parenthetical note to this question was is this even possible? But I think that you've really given us shining examples that identities are under attack by a very few. Yeah. And that the majority of us are really wanting to show up, step up, be engaged, do our very best. We want to learn the right things. We want to practice the things we've learned in the last few years that are working. We want to, so I'm going to suggest that it is possible. And anything else you want to add in terms of meeting this moment and being able to help co-create safe places for people?
Yes. First, I want to say there are going to be days when it feels impossible, that it feels like equity has been dead and buried, and it's not even something that we can feel like we can access anymore. And if we can recognize that that emotion is valid because of the circumstances of that day, the executive order that went out that day, whatever it might be, as well as recognize it's not always going to feel this way, right? That's the start. For me, I have found there's very specific, again, made up words that help to pursue the same impact without the verbiage that creates a barrier. And those ones are any strategy that you can put into play where it trends towards a focus on we versus us versus them.
Yeah.
That is what every human wants to lean into right now. A feeling of we instead of feeling like it's us versus them. So any leader out there that is wanting to know, like, how can I support people in the identities that they have without using those banned words, right? Anything that you come up with where the focus is on developing and curating that feeling of we, that's where we're going to reclaim our power. Because right now, the puppet master is pitting us against them. And it's a false front. It doesn't actually exist if we can connect and talk about it. If we stay silent and in our silos, that's when it exists, and that's when the puppet master has power. We can reclaim our power by focusing on how do we create that we. And it's often through the universal themes.
I love that so much. And that's actually something I've been thinking about, that if things get polarized enough that it's like it comes full circle and becomes unifying. That if things get bad enough people are impacted, and this seems like, I'm like, if I have to find a gift of right now,
like, do it.
If things get bad enough that the things that has originally separated us are now going to bring us back together, because enough people are going to say, like, oh, wow, like, we didn't mean for it to go this far, no matter what side you're on, if you're their sides or whatever. And then, like, is that the thing where then instead of it being like this, 49-51 split that we always see in, elections and everything, that instead it then becomes like, oh, we're like 90-10. Like, we're like 90 of us believe in 90% believe in human dignity. And we got like really far away from that for a while. And then we saw like, oh, shoot, we all have to do some recalibration.
Yes.
Regardless of sides and
there
groups
it is.
And what
we
have you.
all have to do some recalibration.
And then that's the we and the going together.
We really are experiencing such a clarification in what we want in a federal leader. I did not know how clearly I want some very specific things in a federal leader until 2025. We are clarifying the desire through the contrast, and I am confident that it's going to go exactly the way you said. Once enough people are impacted and have that contrasting experience where they become very clear on what they actually want to experience in life, then that creates that connection and we come together because that's what we all want to experience. And then we move forward that way. Now, I want to be really clear. Harm is being done. And it is being done by individuals, not just systems, but like humans. And that harm also perpetuates into our homes and into our family environments. And I don't want to just sugarcoat it and say, like, let's ignore the us versus them, because sometimes it's coming at your face. If you are trans in America right now, it is absolutely in your face. And it will absolutely feel like us versus them. And so that connection of we might have to start internally. How am I protecting myself? And then how am I asking for help? How am I asking for protection? And then that becomes that we. But if we're not at a point where we're connected to ourselves enough to be able to create those boundaries, internal and external, and hold them and ask for that help and support, we're not going to get to that collective we. It will stay us versus them, and the war will be inside.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was a really important distinction. How are you currently showing up as a shameless leader?
I love this because one of the concepts that we teach is no BS leadership, and the BS is blame and shame. So, right? Blame is when we're in our team meeting and it's someone else that's to blame for the problem that we're having, or in our community, in our organizations. And shame is when we are unnecessarily finding fault in ourselves that is not productive, right? So I love being able to embrace this no BS leadership. And I would say how I'm showing up as a shameless leader, I am voluntarily putting myself into more and more spaces of straight white women. And this has been something that I've avoided, with Lex's group being the very notable exception. Honestly, I think you all were my safe space to...
And Lex being the coach that we shared, our speaking coach that we shared.
Yes, Alexia
we
Verdon.
love and adore.
Amazing. And she very intentionally created I don't use the phrase often, but a safe space for people of many different identities, where I was able to show up as my true, authentic, queer self in front of all these straight women, hear the responses, some of which were not great, and still be okay, and still build up that resilience, and still build up that ability to respond to that, which built my confidence so that I could... Yesterday, I went to one of those National Association of Women Business Owners, and it was such a heteronormative space. And 3 years ago, I would have been ashamed. I would have been ashamed of a lot. That's that internalized homophobia. Right?
Yeah.
And so I've been able to start identifying that, deconstructing that, interrupting those thought patterns, so that yesterday I could show up as my full, authentic self without any shame, and be the queer leader that room needed.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, goosebumps. Okay, so you have dropped like 1,000 amazing gems here for us. And so now everyone wants to work with you. So can you tell people, how do you work with organizations and leaders? Where can people find you and all that good stuff? And then I will have everything linked up in the show notes for folks listening, but go ahead and shout out any links you want to shout out.
All right, let's start with how we do the work is usually through trainings, virtual or in person. It can be as short as an hour and a half. Our most effective training is when we do a in-person kickoff for about half the day, and then we do a Sustainable Leadership Academy. So it's a virtual gathering about every 2 weeks, 3 times after that kickoff. And it allows people to take in the concepts, try them out in their real life, realize they had some questions, come back, figure things out, right? That's when we see real impact. It's very effective. So we do those trainings. We also really wanted to provide support because sometimes I'll do a keynote. People will have questions, but their company hasn't hired me. So once a month, I host, we call it Joyful Office Hours, leading into that joy. So it's once a month, it's an hour, it's drop in. You can come and get any kind of support that you need to prevent burnout or to develop your emerging leader skills. That's super fun. Love it. joyfulofficehours.com. And then we also wanted to create something because we found that we would do a training at work, and so many people would be like, I've been okay, but my partner is so stressed and really on the verge of burnout. So we created a little kit. It's free. You can download it. And it was those 3 things that we talked about earlier, the definition, the warning signs, and the joy. And so at burnoutstarterkit.com, you can start that process. It's like 8-minute videos from me where you can kind of go through those exercises. And especially when teams do it together, or couples do it together, or volunteer boards of directors do it together, it creates incredible synergy, and it develops a language, a common language. Again, the words are made up and they're going to mean something slightly different to each of us. But when we can develop a common language and we can say, oh, there's your warning sign, babe. What do we need to do? Right? That becomes so much more effective to prevent that burnout. So I'd love to work with all of you in a training, in person, virtual would be awesome. I would love to see you at Joyful Office Hours. And if you're a DIY kind of person, go to burnoutstarterkit.com and you can get access to that.
And we have everything linked up in the show notes. So if you go to sarahdean.com/podcast, and then you can go to the episode with Elena Joy, or whatever platform you're listening on, go to Spotify, Apple, etc., and scroll to the episode here with Elena Joy. This was so good, Elena. Oh my gosh. This was so much fun for me to get to, we've spent time together like in the friend colleague space, but this was like digging into the work colleague space, which is so fun. And I just love seeing you on fire, and the work that you're doing is so important and so valuable. And I'm so incredibly grateful that you have found a way to do this work in a way that's so meaningful, in a way that gives us the workarounds that we need right now, but then also in a way that is able to have really significant impact at a time when it's so desperately needed. So thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.